Welcome to Witham Sounding Board, a podcast sharing powerful business tips, insights, and trends for those seeking to become a rock star in their industry.
All right, welcome to the show and thanks for joining us. We are about to dive into some personal cybersecurity tips and guidance. First, some introductions. My name is Billy Thomas, a senior tax manager here at Witham, specializing in private client services, specifically helping wealthy families with their personal, estate, trust, and transfer tax planning needs. Most importantly, though, I'm a very naive individual when it comes to personal cybersecurity, which led me to seek out some experts here within the firm and bringing in Witham's cyber team. This leads me to an introduction for Julie. Would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and introducing yourself and sharing some of your esteemed background?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Billy. I appreciate it. I'm Julie Tracy, and I'm a member of the Witham cyber team on the advisory side. I'm a manager here, and we work with clients to help improve their overall cybersecurity posture. I've been with Witham for quite a while now. I have a very extensive background in banking. So if you ever want to know something about cybersecurity and being regulated, ask somebody that works in IT and banking, and they can tell you all about it. So lots of fun.
Well, I do have some banking related questions, so I'm excited to get your insights. And,
Awesome.
It's great to have you here. So thank you for taking the time to talk with me and answer my, novice questions and help me and the listeners learn something to better protect ourselves, not just the organizations that we work for. So the first thing when I think about cybersecurity from a personal perspective is passwords. That's the easiest thing that comes to mind. And I've heard the term password hygiene. It's a favorite buzzword of mine that I've, picked up along the way, but I would have a hard time defining it. So what would you say? How would you define password hygiene, or why is it such a commonly used phrase these days?
Boy, thanks for picking my favorite subject, actually, right out of the gate. Password hygiene is something that I absolutely love because it's something that we can do that's incredibly impactful and it's free. So password hygiene is the practice of having good, solid passwords that you don't use across multiple sites and that you make sure are not compromised. So, for example, there's a site out on the internet called Have I Been Pwned, PWNED. It's a hacker term for I own your network. And you can go out there and you can see if your email addresses have been part of any of the breach lists that are out there, things of that nature. You can also see if passwords have been compromised out there. And they have quite an extensive password list. And you don't just look through the list. You'd put potential passwords or passwords that you think have used in the past that you think are compromised, and boom, there they go. And I always used this when I was training new hires. We would sit down together and we would go over these passwords. And we would talk about, the old saying was, you need a password with 8 characters, an uppercase, lowercase, number, and special character. And I can give you one of those, and it's an incredibly weak and multiple times compromised password. So what we like to do is use either multiple words together or passphrases. Passphrases are really popular and are a really great way to remember a password. The other thing with passwords, coming from that banking background, the average teller would need 19 passwords during the course of a day to do their regular teller business. There's no way that, in the course of a day, you can remember 19 passwords and keep, rolling through that.
I'm not sure I have 19 passwords at the moment, so I might be in trouble.
It's funny because I'll sit and go through, I use a password manager. With them here, we support the use of password managers, and we'll talk about that a little more detail later. But so I'll pull up my password manager and I'll look and kind of get an idea of how many passwords I have out there. So between work, banking, other financial services, websites that I might go to, all my social media, my streaming services, all that good stuff, I have well over 200 unique passwords in my password vault. And by unique passwords, I mean, I don't use them over again. So there's absolutely no way I can keep track of 200 passwords. So, it's important to, one, use unique passwords. And I don't mean okay, my password's going to be password 123, then my next password's going to be password 1234. that kind of stuff, derivations of that same password. It's easy enough for hackers to guess that stuff. So you really want to make sure that you're using completely random, not related to you, questions or passwords that people are not going to be able to guess about you, and that you have that really good password to keep your password manager safe.
Yeah, password manager is something that I feel like I need to start embracing sooner rather than later. And sorry for our internal IT team that is listening to this, but I'm talking specifically from a personal perspective and getting on board with 200 unique passwords. It is obviously the first thing that comes to mind when you think of cybersecurity, and I think it's a friendly reminder that it's something that you need to keep top of mind all the time. So let's say we lock down the passwords and I get that in check. So that's my first step after this podcast.
Right.
The second step, or the second prompt, I guess I would normally receive when I go to log into one of the websites, specifically banking or something maybe like email or my insurance or something like that. I'm often prompted with a message that says add your phone number.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the most common one. Sometimes add your email address or something like that, but I always see it's usually a phone number. And is that something that's a good idea to do every time? Not every time? Is it?
Yeah. So that's considered multi-factor authentication, but
Okay.
it's probably, I'll be honest with you, it's the weakest level of multi-factor authentication. And it's because you can fake phone numbers. And so you can do SIM card replacements and things like that. And so someone can actually be using my phone number and they can intercept that. And so what we recommend, and not every site offers this, and that's kind of, an issue, is using true multi-factor authentication where you're using, an authenticator, and that can be an app on your phone. I have Google Authenticator. We use Duo here at Witham. I also have the LastPass Authenticator, which is related to LastPass, which is one of the password managers that we've taught, kind of referenced briefly. And so what that does is that generates a randomly generated code every 30 seconds. And it changes every 30 seconds. And I'll pull that up and I'll punch that code in from my cell phone into the site. And then I log into the site. Some vendors have opted to do the 6-digit code that they will text to you. Again, that's better than not having something. But if there's an option to use an authenticator, I would recommend that. The authenticator for the end users are free. They don't cost anything. You just have to make sure that the site is set up. And so you would go through the settings and kind of look through it. Now, I will tell you, the bank that I use, they use multi-factor authentication there, and they use Duo actually. But if you go into your security settings in there, it's not even showing up there that you can turn it on. So you may have to call your bank or your, wherever it is that you're dealing with, maybe it's your Fidelity, your Principal, or whoever you have your 401k with, for your other investments, and say, hey, I want to set up multi-factor authentication. Do you have that available? And most of your financial institutions are going to say yes, because again, we talked about they're regulated. And so they've been told, hey, in order for your customers to be secure, you have to offer that. Now,
Sure.
My insurance company, I use a big national insurance company for my home and auto insurance, and they send me a text. And that's the only option that I have, but I use it. In every site that I can, I use multi-factor authentication. I use multi-factor authentication for every one of my social media sites. I can't tell you how many times, you see, I think it's really more prevalent, at least right now on Facebook. Oh, I got hacked. No, maybe they did get hacked, but you see a lot of spoofed accounts now and things like that. And so being really suspicious with that. But multi-factor authentication is really huge. In my previous job, I was an admin for a business site. And one of the other admins, they actually did get hacked. And they didn't do anything to their personal account, but they did do something to the business account. And they were putting false links out there to go to malicious sites. And so potential customers to that business would go and they could click on that site and go someplace malicious. Fortunately, we found it on a Sunday morning. It was put up. We had it down within an hour. We don't think anyone followed that link. But it's just, what we did at that point, we said every admin has to use multi-factor authentication.
Sure.
And so, you understand that when you have a business social media site, it does tie to an individual account to manage it and stuff. So just making sure that you put on lockdown basically everything that you have that you put out there.
Sure. So don't skip the option to use multi-factor authentication, although if there's extra layers of it, such as Duo or something a little bit more secure, I guess is maybe the way to phrase it, use those instead, or for everything that it's available for.
Yeah, and I see a lot of them, like the Google Authenticator. I'm trying to think of the other one that I see prevalently, but I probably have most of my stuff, in all honesty, in the Google Authenticator. And
Okay.
it's just an app that you can download. And then each time, the very first time you register it, you take that picture, the QR picture of the QR code, and then you complete the registration by entering the 6-digit code that you see on your phone when you take that picture. And then it confirms that everything is tied in there together. I will tell you, with Duo, there's a little gotcha there. If you replace your phone, make sure that you back up all of your multi-factor authentication, so that when you get a new phone, you can restore that to the new phone. Duo actually has like a footprint, a thumbprint within the phone itself. And so when you get a new phone, it won't do those push notifications. You actually have to contact the administrator for that site. So with my online banking, I can get a text message for Duo to put those credentials in, but I can't get my Duo push. I have to call the bank and say, I have a new phone. I need to have you register this new phone for me. So Duo is great because it's convenient to have the push and just say accept, but it can be a little burdensome on the end user when they get a new phone. And I will tell you, I've seen examples of multi-factor authentication being compromised because someone keeps getting that push notification from Duo. So a hacker has credentials that are yours, and they're trying to get in, and they're putting in the username and password, and then they hit that. You get to that Duo push, and you see it on your phone, and you hit ignore, or no, and you kind of get frustrated with it, and finally you're just like yes, and you make it stop. That yes lets that hacker in. And so understanding that if you've not requested that multi-factor authentication, don't respond to it, because that would be you letting a hacker into your system.
Sure. Yeah, that's certainly good advice, and I feel like luckily there's not an incident that's happened to me before as far as the multi-factor authentication, but certainly good to keep in mind. And going back to your earlier point about getting a new phone, which I think is super prevalent these days or right now with the holiday season coming, and so many people, getting wishing from Santa Claus or whoever that they might be expecting a new phone this holiday season. And
Exactly.
certainly good to keep in mind when you're transferring all your data and transferring all your information over to the new phone. Is there anything really quick, just speaking on that, is there anything you would recommend when you're getting rid of the old phone that you would do? There's so many trade-in options and different things. What is there anything that you would just say, hey, this is what you would do if you're gonna get a new phone? What would you do with the old one?
Yeah, I absolutely, you factory reset it. And honestly, on those sensitive apps like that with your multi-factor authentication, things like that, I actually go through the process of uninstalling them, clearing all the data, and then doing a factory reset. And then I'll turn it on and make sure you can't get to anything. But yeah, a lot of folks will turn those phones in for credit. And obviously that's happening a lot this time of year. I make sure though that you don't do that factory reset until you've confirmed that everything, especially with your MFA and things like that, are on your new phone and that you can access everything.
Sure.
So like your Duo on your banking, you can still on Wi-Fi get that Duo push on your old phone, but until you contact whoever is managing that Duo for you for whatever, be it your bank or your employer, until you get that transferred to your new phone, don't do that factory reset on your old phone yet.
Good.
You'll get
These are good. These are good tips. I feel like you're saving my headache down the road. So much appreciated. Thank you, Julie.
Absolutely.
So we've talked a lot about the primary, what I call the primary tools that I would use on a regular basis. We talked about the, email and banking and shopping and streaming. That was actually one I was not even really thinking about, which goes to show you that there's a whole list of things that you're connected to that you don't even really realize. But so recently I bought and installed a new Nest doorbell or Ring type doorbell that shows you who's at your front door and so forth. And I had to go through a litany of steps to get it connected to my home network. And in doing so, are there things that you would recommend or things I should be worried about when I'm connecting things to my home network, or things I should be doing to protect myself better when I'm doing that?
So absolutely. So kind of let's start with passwords.
Okay.
So again, when you set up that password for your Nest or your Ring doorbell, you want to make sure it's a unique password. It's
Okay.
not being used anywhere else. Some folks, in my home, I only have one internet connection.
Same.
Some folks actually they'll do two. They'll do
Okay.
one kind of like for the family, and maybe they've got, a couple of kids that game or stream, all the time. And so maybe they might have another connection for their kids, that kind of stuff. And so understanding, which network would you put that on? What's the kind of sensitivity level of that? I would make sure unique passwords, think about what you're going to put that on as far as the network. A lot of even consumer grade like Wi-Fi routers and things like that will allow you to create a separate network. So you can kind of create like a guest network. And what I would do instead of creating that guest network, just create like, I call it the IoT, the Internet of Things network. And you can put those kinds of devices like that on that network.
The doorbell, the fridge,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I recently, like you, I just bought a security camera and I put it in my garage. I had a dog that was kind of being a pain, and he was going to be in the garage for a while. I wanted to be able to keep an eye on him while I was on a trip. So when the dog walker came, I knew everything was okay. I spent a lot of time researching the various types of cameras and things like that. This was the only one that didn't have cloud storage. It had cloud access, but all of the images and stuff were stored locally on a little micro SD card that you inserted into the camera. And so I opted to go with that. But, again, locking it down, making sure that I have the right password, going into the app, making sure, because these are all managed typically through your phone on an app. So making sure that
Sure.
that app is up to date, and then checking for updates to the device itself, which you should be able to do through the app. And so making sure that you keep those up to date as well. So I think,
Can I interrupt you and ask
Sure.
maybe a silly question?
Sure.
So it's so easy to default to the updates and just, I feel like everyone's phone checks for updates immediately and sort of pretty much just does it out of habit, which is great for security and protection, or at least better for security and protection, maybe not great. But when you're talking about the hardware, maybe I'm using the right terminology. How often would you check for updates and things?
I check monthly. So like
Okay.
your laptop, your computers, things like that. Typically, you're going to check weekly for those. There are some applications like using the Chrome browser. Every time you close it and then you open it again, actually Google goes out and checks if there's an update. Same with Firefox. So making sure that you do that. You want to make sure that part of that update process involves a reboot. Typically, even with on like Internet of Thing devices, your computers, even when you're updating like the smart TVs in your home and things like that, those updates typically don't fully complete until you do a restart. So
Sure.
making sure you finish off with that restart. And so, and you'll see it, when I do an update to my home router, the last thing that it does is says, okay, I'm going to restart. And sometimes you're like, oh, I don't want to restart right now. I'm in the middle of this. Do it anyway. Get that restart done, because what will happen is it'll be like 2 or 3 weeks down the road and you've forgotten. So just make sure you get that update. That last part of it is the reboot to finish getting everything written into the system.
Sure. You're being very generous with 2 or 3 weeks and you forgot. But yes, I understand that, adding that to my to-do list as well, to start updating some of the hardware and the doorbells and such around the house. So that very good advice. I guess when I think of the router, and now I'm starting to think about the security that's protecting everything. So whether that's the second Internet of Things, shadow network or anything that you have in your house, or just your general home network that you have, I would have been naive and presumed that the I won't name any names of internet service providers, but it will rhyme with infinity, would provide or at least offer some sort of protection for me as a subscriber or somebody that's paying for the service, which it comes with maybe what I'm thinking now is a basic and very rudimentary offering. But is that safe enough? Is there something else I should be doing? Is there a terminology or like a certain software that I should be looking for?
So it depends on kind of your comfort level. So
Okay.
I'll tell you, me personally, so I don't like to let my internet service provider provide my equipment. So I typically get my own,
Okay.
understanding that I am responsible for that. Now, where I'm at now, I don't think I could do the modem. I think that had to be provided by the service provider. But with a modem, basically, it's just passing everything from the modem into my router. So I have my own router, and that router has a firewall in it, and I can set up all of the security settings on that. And so I manage it. I have my own password on it. They don't know it. They can't get into it. So it gives me, maybe I sound a little paranoid, but it gives me that extra layer of comfort knowing that I'm taking care of it. Basically, they're responsible for delivering service to my house, and then everything from inside my house, I'm responsible for.
Sure.
Now, maybe not everybody feels comfortable with that. I know that some of them are offering more enhanced security offerings now with their internet service provider, but those typically aren't the default configurations. And so you would want to go in and, if you've got a technician that's coming to your house to set this up, I would almost make them walk you through. Show me the security settings, or you can go online and, watch the videos and stuff, and they'll walk you through the various security settings on there, making sure that you change the default passwords. Because think about it, when your internet service provider is deploying, hundreds of thousands of gateways to home users and even to businesses, they're notorious for doing this. They set them up with that single username and password because it's the same across everything. And so you want to make sure that that's changed so that, if Joe Schmo knows that I've got, whatever internet here, and they're like, oh, you can just Google search, what is the default password for Spectrum Internet? And then it'll tell you all those listings. Not only that, but you can say, hey, what's the default password for a Netgear, blah, 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 blah. And it'll tell you that as well. Sure. And so all of that stuff is readily available to anyone out there. And they come in these huge, lists of various databases and stuff. So it's real easy to just, accept the default because it works. Because if you change something, oh my gosh, what if I get locked out? The beauty of not only the consumer grade, but the commercial grade as well, is there's a little button in there that factory resets it, and you can basically start over. So if you mess it up, you factory reset it and you start over. Most of your internet service providers are set to just work with what's default out of the box. And so, as you go through and tweak things, you want to make sure you don't get yourself locked out of anything. Sure. So that's kind of, know that you've got that safety net there. If you mess it up, okay, I'll redo it. I'll have to re-put it in my SSID, your Wi-Fi identifier, and then your passphrase and things like that. If you've got a lot of people in and out of your house too, and you have kids, especially if you have teenage kids, hey, what's your Wi-Fi password so I can get on here onto my phone while I'm sitting here, supposed to be interacting with you, but I'm on, Snapchat or Instagram or who knows what. Mm-hmm. And so, all of your kids' friends now have your Wi-Fi password as well. And so, it might be something that you consider changing every couple of months just to make sure that there aren't random people, sitting on your internet connection at home, looking through what's going on in your home as well. And you can go in, when you go into your device, your router or your gateway, you can actually see all of the devices that have been connected and all of the devices that are currently connected. And you can, if you don't want them on there, you can drop them off and knock them off. What you can't do, though, is if they've got that password, when they come back on, they can reconnect. I think you can on some of them. You can block them permanently. So it just depends on what kind of equipment you have. But, kids' friends don't always stay consistent. Or, you can't control once you've shared that password with your kids' friends, and then that friend sends it to another friend and another friend and another friend. So, I think especially if you've got a lot of kids in and out of your house, it would be important to change that on a regular basis.
This is all terrifying.
It should be.
Yeah. But it's good. It's very, very good information, because it is things I've, maybe been aware of, or things I've, loosely considered, and then, time slips by, or, like I get busy or get distracted, and then it sort of, I'll get back to it, and then I never get back to it until I'm talking to someone like you that says you need to make this a priority.
There you go.
So
like
this is that's right. Yeah, this is I think that's why I gravitate to the word hygiene, because I think of that as like a regular basis. Like that's something like you're doing with your teeth. That's, showering. Like, it's like personal. It's like something you just need to do on a regular basis to keep up with things. So, all of these things that we've talked about, the passwords and the multi-factor authentication and the Internet of Things, and sort of changing some of the defaults and sort of setting up your own security systems internally, I feel like that is extremely useful information for, like I said, a novice like me, and just little tidbits of things I can do just to make myself a little bit more secure, and aspire to be as secure as you are in your household. But I feel like I've got a long list of things to do for homework tonight to help make myself and maybe the neighborhood kids more secure. So thank you. As we're sort of coming in closing here, like I said, I do feel like we've covered a lot of the things, and a lot of the topics have been things that I've seen in emails from our internal IT team, or from you and your team, that coming through as things to share with our clients, which is very, very useful. And I will be the first to admit that I'm not the most. There's just some hesitation that I have internally to adopt a lot of these habits personally. So it's good to hear that like many of the terms and the terminology and the buzzwords are all practical on a organization basis, and then it translates almost immediately or exactly to a personal basis. So I'll have to start paying a little bit more attention to those IT emails and things. But I really, really appreciate you sharing the tips and all the advice with us today. Would you mind doing a little bit of a game with us sort of towards the end as we're getting ready to wrap up here?
Yeah.
All right. So it's a game I've created, and I'm calling it the Top of Mind. As you may have guessed, I'm going to ask a series of questions, and I'm looking for you to just say the first thing that comes to your mind, or the first, idea that pops into your head whenever I mention a phrase or a question. But there's no order, no plan here. It's just sort of things that I've thought about or heard about.
Okay.
You mentioned your kids earlier. So what is one thing that you have instilled in your kids to keep them cyber secure?
Proud parent moment for me was when they both started using password management systems.
Very cool. How old are they? If you don't mind sharing.
25 and 23.
That's good. I'm glad they're using it. I will tell my mom that she can be proud that I will eventually have one tonight.
There you go.
If you are subject to a breach, like say from Target, Home Depot from a few years ago, the U.S. government from a few years ago, well, what's one thing that you would do next once you found out you were part of that breach?
Change password that you use for that site and never use it again, because it's going to be out of that breach list forever.
Okay. So cross that one off the 200 and add a new one.
That's correct.
Got it. All right. Would you sign up for LifeLock?
I personally have not. I have multiple sites that I use to monitor my credit, and I have alerts set up. So anytime someone, it's actually myself, does a credit inquiry, I get an alert immediately about it.
Okay. Good advice. Should everyone have a trash email?
I think so.
Maybe what is a trash email for anybody that like me had to Google that first before I asked the question?
Yeah. So a trash email is an email that you use that you don't give out to like, hey, Billy, email me. Here's my email address because I'm going to actually correspond with you. Trash email is when you're at the store and they're like, hey, you want to get 25% off? Give me your email address. And so that's the email. That's that trash email that you give to marketing people, or sorry guys, or, at the stores or whatever, and they're going to send you and spam you with all kinds of emails and coupons and things like that. That's that trash email. And I have one. I check it a couple of times a year just to keep it open. I never get anything of value in there.
Okay. That's good. I will also be creating one of those. All right. So this has happened. This is an exact example from my personal life. So grandma accidentally clicks a link from a scammer email and has subsequently told me about it. What's the one piece of advice that you would have told her if that was your grandmother?
So that's happened to my dad. So he's clicked on an email, or he waits to tell me, and that's always the worst. So the first thing I'm going to tell my grandma is, let me come check your computer, and I'm going to use, multiple different kinds of endpoint protection to scan it. I'm going to go through, I'm going to get like Malwarebytes, things like that, and I'm going to do a deep dive through her computer. If I see anything and it's acting funny, honestly, what I'm going to do personally is I'm going to reformat her computer and reinstall everything. We'll just start from scratch. And hey, grandma, were you typing any passwords, around this? Did you type, when you clicked on that link, did you give them any credentials? Let's get that changed. For me, I'm going to jump in and actually do something. Now I live far away from my parents. And so I would probably have someone come to their house and be my hands for me, and I'll walk them through that process.
Okay.
But
Sorry to interrupt you. Is that someone like a contractor that you would hire, or is that like a family friend that you would have to go over there and do it?
I'd probably have my brother go over there and say, okay, I need you to do this. I want you to do this command. I want you to do this. And actually now there's so many, I can remote in and take a look. We've got so many remote connectivity tools now. I can actually look at it and see, and if I see any indicators of compromise. And that's the tough part. When I run into clients, I'm not particularly excited about going, to grandma's house. It's not my grandma, to look at her computer. I've done it in the past, but I don't do it very often anymore. I would typically farm that out to the junior guys that work for me. Hey, you're looking to make a few extra bucks on the side. This person needs, XYZ done. It's hard to find a good trusted. And so I would seek out and see if there's someone in your family that knows a reputable and trusted kind of, not really kind of a repair shop or a IT type shop, for a personal home computer like that. Depending upon what's on it, it's normally best to just reformat it and start over again. Yeah, there's grandma's computer typically doesn't have a whole lot on it unless she's got recipes and pictures, and hopefully we have those backed up someplace else.
Yeah, that's primarily what it is, and some sort of, maybe email that should have gone to a trash email somewhere else, and that's what she probably clicked on. So next question, best tip you have ever heard for social media safety?
Don't answer.
Or a tip that you've...
So we talked about multi-factor authentication, but people send around those answer these 20 questions about yourself. Here are mine. And they list all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And when you go through, it's a lot of things that can be used for, the 3 questions to prove your identity when you go into a site. They've gotten away from that, thankfully, but you're still seeing some of that on there. And it's also great for a hacker to be able to kind of phish you because they have some personal information about you. People are always looking to make that personal connection. And so if they think that they know you, you become more susceptible. So don't answer all those questions and put them out there online.
All right. That's good advice.
My mom loves to do that, though. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, I've got a set of answers that sort of don't answer the question, but it's something that prompts me to think of something differently. So I've got almost a password for an answer.
There you go.
But it's it's still useful to have and not answer those questions in reality, or make sure you're aware of what you're answering. All right. So one other question: do you save your credit card data on sites that offer it?
You know what? I was going to say I don't. The only site that I do is Amazon, but everything else I do not. I go through the pain of, where's my wallet? Let me find my purse, get it out, and fill in that credit card information that way. So yeah, typically, Target, No. Home Depot, no. So yeah, I don't do it as a habit, especially like when you're dealing with like, sometimes you're dealing with like some smaller retailers. There's a local roaster around here that I love to get coffee from. I don't know what their security setup is. I have no clue. So I put it in once and that's it. So that's always makes me feel kind of nervous anyway. So
Understood. I know that at least my bank is sort of offering these virtual cards now, which are meant to at least presented as a way to disguise your credit card from being shared with a Target or a smaller retailer. Is that something that you would entertain or recommend, or is it still too new to have an opinion on?
I'm going to guess if it's based on and built. So I use Google Pay. So like I said, I come from a banking background. And when I was at the bank, we implemented Google Pay and Apple Pay for our users. And so I spent a lot of time going through training on how the back end works and understand. So when you use Google Pay or Apple Pay, that is essentially a virtual card. Your credit card information is never exposed out there when you use those payment sources, which is awesome. Not only that, but like I can go to the grocery, take just my phone. I've got my loyalty card and I've got my Google Pay. I just put my phone up, at the cashier and I'm done. I put my PIN in and off I go. And so, if I happen to leave and I didn't bring my purse because I was in a hurry or whatever, I have that. And so I like the convenience of it, but I also understand the security of it, which is why I've embraced it. So if the virtual cards are built on that same premise, then absolutely I would certainly entertain that for sure.
Okay, that's good. It makes me feel like I've done something semi close to correct, which is connected to Google. So I finally got one. But as you can tell, I feel like that's the end of the lightning round. And thank you for entertaining the game of Top of Mind. Many of the questions were centered around shopping and holiday season, which is topical and right around the corner. So I really appreciate you playing along with us and certainly sharing all of your advice and all of your insight and all of your expertise to me personally and to everyone else listening here. So thank you very, very much. And I know it's, like I said, a very, very critical time to have this be forefront and top of mind. So thank you again. And is there anything else that you want to share with me or the audience?
Just a reminder, coming from that banking background, make sure that you review on a regular basis your online banking and look at your transactions, look at what's going on there for not only your banking, but any credit cards that you have as well, and make sure that you can verify all the purchases there. You have a limited window in which you can dispute those. So just make sure you keep an eye on that stuff.
That's good advice, and I will add that to my list as well. Thank you very much, Julie. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Billy.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you'll be first in line to hear what's coming next. Don't want to wait for our next episode? Check us out at withum.com. That's WITHUM.com.